Welcome to paradise.
Luan, it's not a sign of weakness to say.
The new cast of characters in Dying Light 2 are set 15 years after the events of the original game. The main character of the sequel, Aiden, is placed on the outskirts of Vilder, a fictional city in Europe that serves as one of humanity's final strongholds. Aiden is a pilgrim, one of the few people who dare to travel into the outside world in order to transport supplies or messages among the sparsely populated villages in Europe. In a world where everyone has been afflicted by a vicious illness that has rendered the majority of the population into zombies, pilgrims are regarded as an accepted evil. However, as we'll discover in the prologue of the game, Aiden has different reasons for becoming a pilgrim. This creates the framework for a grand tale of betrayal. With the exception of the sporadic zombies roaming the countryside, the world around me feels lifeless as I make my way to Vilder, which will hopefully be the conclusion of my quest. But at night, it's a totally other scenario. While the prologue, which ends after you get in the city, is intended to teach you the fundamentals, it hardly suffices to get you ready for what's to come. Although the game tries to take you off the main path by presenting you with a ton of side quests and activities, these aren't intriguing enough to make it worthwhile of your time. The narrative of Dying Light 2 starts off rather strongly at the beginning of the game. The game's parkour moves combined with combat maneuvers are by far its main attraction. It is impossible to come near to it, which is both a benefit and a drawback. Although the story in the original game was far from renowned, I would have anticipated some type of enhancement in this area as well. You're instantly involved in the politics and intrigues involving the two main factions dominating the city, survivors and peacekeepers, despite the fact that you are an absolute stranger to the residents of Vilder. You are invited to choose a side in this conflict over control of the scant resources left in the city as you search for your sister. Sadly, the only component of which your decisions have any impact is how part of is laid out. Personally, I largely chose survivors since they gave me more alternatives for navigating certain areas, whereas peacekeepers give upgrades to the zones that are more combat-oriented, which I utterly did not require. Many of the choices you must make in the game are like that, which is somewhat disheartening. The good news is that movement and fighting are on an entirely separate plane. The character development, leveling up, combat, and parkour moves all feel purposeful and thoughtful. It makes a big difference to be able to move more quickly and jump higher when traveling between sites and when visiting otherwise inaccessible places. Aiden is so frail in the first several hours that every confrontation with zombies or bandits requires extreme caution. Gaining a few levels and learning some new skills makes the dread and unease you felt at the beginning of the game when trying to raid a zombie nest at night vanish. Despite Dying Light 2's size, it doesn't unlock after 5, 10, or even 20 hours of play. The paraglider and grappling hook, as well as helpful mechanisms like fast travel, are only available to players who complete primary objectives because progression is closely related to the story. Thankfully, Dying Light 2 lets you know right away if your character is prepared for a certain task or difficulty. While having more HP, stamina, or knowledge of more parkour combat moves makes a significant difference, story missions and side quests are not dependent on your level or abilities. As a result, you can complete the game by skipping almost all of the side content that would ordinarily provide you with sufficient experience and opportunities to advance levels. I've been attempting to complete a lot of the side material, but the side quests are just not very appealing, so I mostly concentrated on eradicating zombie nests at night or finishing different tasks. I would definitely accept a side quest if it was nearby, but I wouldn't do it otherwise. Let's now talk briefly about the riches. The most obvious thing about Dying Light 2 is that there is a ton of loot to be found. Weapons, armor, consumables, treasures, and crafting supplies are all present. Weapons are far more helpful because they can't be repaired, therefore you wouldn't be switching between them very often, whereas valuables are useless and may be sold to merchants for a large sum of money. The longer you can use a weapon, the rarer it gets. Additionally, applying mods to a weapon can significantly reduce its damage, therefore it is preferable to maintain rarer weapons in perfect condition until they are nearly worn out before doing so. Along with the combat and parkour skill trees, the equipment, weapons, armors, is a component of the RPG aspect. Both one-handed and two-handed melee weapons are available, however they differ in terms of size and design. The numerous stats that the armor parts in the game have can be used with either one-handed or two-handed weapons. The equipment in Dying Light 2 is primarily designed for the tank, brawler, ranger, and medic classes. All four of these playstyles are completely possible, but I only looked at these metrics early on in the game and opted to use the weapon and equipment with the highest damage and armor. There are no guns in the game, but if you have enough arrows, certain of the bows can make any fight easy. It's so strong that you don't even need to wear equipment that grants you benefits for ranged combat or stealth. And the fact that your bow doesn't deteriorate, of course. However, you must carry a lot of arrows that must be made from materials that are not difficult to locate but do take some grinding. In-game consumables can be made using recipes that can be purchased from crafters. The recipes can be improved to increase the effectiveness of consumables like boosters, arrows, and healing kits. You'll need items for that can only drop from Moving on to the graphics and music, Dying Light 2 looks stunning on PC and, with the most recent updates, routinely runs at 60 frames per second with NVIDIA DLSS, ray tracing, and all graphic settings at their highest settings. The sound effects are quite disturbing, especially at night. The voice acting in the remaining scenes is a little dull, but I have to commend the performers for giving it their best shot despite the lack of fascinating material. There is no doubt that Dying Light 2 is not a technological marvel. Although I haven't come across any significant or game-breaking bugs, I have come across my fair share of minor problems. Given that the first game was in a similar state upon launch, it seemed inevitable that this expansive open-world game would have some flaws. But if that serves as any guidance to anyone debating whether to purchase Dying Light 2 or not, the first game's bugs were corrected rather quickly, so I have no doubt that the same will be true of the follow-up as well. Compared to the original, Dying Light 2 is bigger and better. The identical formula is used, but it outperforms the original in every way. My primary issue with Dying Light 2 is that it starts off with such lofty expectations but then utterly fails to live up to them. This title would have been only passable if not for the excellent combat and parkour systems, so this alone sets it apart from the sea of unmemorable AAA games that are more show than content. Its plot is erratic and very depressing by the halfway mark. Furthermore, the side quests can only be included as filler. But if you like the original game as much as I did, you'll adore Dying Light 2 even more.